interest in that, but right now I'll open it up for any questions that anybody has on the floor. Yes?
The timing on this, was there any specific reason for holding a press conference now? I mean, what is the main point, I guess, that you're trying to get out to people, and why the timing now?
Well, we were going to hold it the week of or shortly after the governor's comment, but we discussed it with some people. I was on the road and didn't get back until just a few days ago, so that sort of bumped it to now. And we were concerned that maybe a little too much time had gone by since his comment to make the point. I watched the YouTube of the governor's comment, and of course, like everybody else, cringed at the key point. Listened to the whole thing in context. He's obviously angry. It was the end of the session. I've lobbied for about 25 years. I know what it's like at the end of the session. I don't know what it's like to be a governor at the end of the session, but I can imagine it's stressful and difficult. And he was angry, and he spoke out very emotionally and like a man. And I loved it. It felt like thunder and lightning to me. And he spoke for me. He especially spoke for me because he used that particular allusion. I won't rehearse my statement again. But it's so refreshing in this age of insanity when it comes to sexuality to hear someone in public life use sodomy, gay, homosexual, pick your word, sexual orientation, in the proper context. It's negative, it's not good, it's not positive. What's good is sexuality when it's in marriage and when it's linked to having children and grandchildren. That's when it's a really good thing. And civilizations survive because they reward that behavior and they discourage the other behavior. And the fact of the matter is, our civilization isn't going to survive if we keep going down this road. I've said it since 1989, 90, still saying it.
Everything came to a head when the governor made his comment. I've grown accustomed to his comments. I know Paul LePage. He grew up in Lewiston. We weren't strangers. He shies away a bit from the cutting edge of conservative behavior, perhaps religious conservatives. That's fine. I'm comfortable with that. He does what he has to do, and obviously we're doing what we have to do. But he's a man. He's one that we should respect. It was wrong for Christian leaders in Maine to criticize this man when he's up against an onslaught of political individuals in office to railroad these bills, these harsh bills, and particularly the most recent ones that were passed that would increase the cost of living, increase the cost of food, raise taxes, inevitably raise taxes, and not support him with a balanced budget. The balanced budget, you can argue that all day, but it was wrong for the Christian leaders to criticize him the way they did. They dropped the ball in so many other aspects. I couldn't take it anymore. I'm the one, I think, that started the ball rolling and said, I can't take this anymore. And I took a whole long list of individuals who were giving me all the bad news, and I said, I don't want to hear from you anymore. Because if you don't have the courage to say something, I'm out. I have a life to live. I've got a promise of a successful classical arts school that's being launched, and I don't want this hassle. But I realize that somebody's got to defend this man because he is fundamentally a good man. Governor LePage is a good man, and I have no business criticizing this man because he doesn't speak my language. You think I would want to hook with a guy that can unfurl that kind of colorful language? Well, I might have a beer with him, but it's not my kind of language, and you all know that. As passionate as I am civil. But the Christian leaders had no right to criticize him, and given the way that they handled the same-sex marriage debate, that was it for me. That was it. And when I coupled that with the outright betrayal of what's going on in the Catholic Church today among these liberal priests who are working in clandestine, to undermine the church's teaching on sexual morality, it's too much to take. I check out at that time, and that's why this is happening.
There's going to be people watching this who look at you two and say that you're just a couple of bigots using the Bible and cloak their bigotry. How would you respond to that?
Well, America's a free country. I celebrate their liberty and their conscience, and they are free to decide that I'm a bigot for what I've said. I would urge them to listen to everything in context, to read Philo's comment and let it sink in. There's some ideas there that don't sink in easily. You have to read it a few times. And then think about what they're watching on television. Think about what they're dealing with in their schools. Just think about it. Make up their own mind. If at the end of the day they decide I'm a bigot, then we lose. And we continue to head in that. I know I'm not.
The reality of that question, don't you think for a moment we stop and think of that? You think that would trouble us? That individuals would be that shallow to accuse us of being bigots? Of course we know they're going to do it. No, let me answer your question. Let me answer your question. Okay, this is my turn. I'm answering your question. Don't you think for a moment that we've thought of that we could give that some consideration? It means nothing to us if individuals have this kind of empty response. These are just words that are intended to hurt and intimidate. There's no truth to that. I have apartment buildings in Augusta, and I've got a rental unit in Lewiston, and I rent to Somalis and black people. You're going to call me a bigot because I have these moral views and moral convictions? You want to do that, go ahead, but you have no credibility. And I would warn that you would at least question the value and the merit of your own question before you even ask the question.
You did just equate pedophilia to homosexuality.
Pedophilia?
Am I wrong? Did I misunderstand you?
Say that again?
You just equated homosexuality to pedophilia. Did you not?
Well, the bulk of homosexuals practice pedophilia. There's a higher percentage of homosexuals practice pedophilia. I know that a lot of the studies have aimed at referring to this as perpetrators as being pedophiles, but many of these Catholic priests that were on this website were having sex with each other. That's homosexuality, it's not pedophilia. So don't paint it a different color. It has no merit.
So,
Do you feel like you're helping the governor right now in the re-election?
I have no idea.
Because he is kind of saying he's not affiliated with this at all. I feel like you're helping him right now.
Don't know.
Well, they're the ones, the people that were speaking are the ones that got them elected. I think you would have to be concerned with some point. But, hey, it is what it is. It is what it is. There are greater things than protecting Governor LePage's political campaign. There are other things that come into play here that will determine whether or not he's elected, not whether or not we stand here. Let's put things in perspective, people. You know, he's a good governor. He's done a lot of good things to help all of Maine people. He doesn't have an ideology that aims him in one straight direction. He goes in several different directions, and he's serving all the people of Maine. And we believe that we're talking to those people that will continue to help him.
I think some of us might just be a little confused. Is this a follow-up to the governor's, what he said? Is this a follow-up to gay marriage passing in the state, or is this a follow-up to priests being gay? This is a lot in one.
It is a lot, and that's a very valid question. Thank you for
because as far as I know, the governor's comments were not about homosexuality, and it seems like you're equating that to...
The governor, I believe, according to my statement, made the comparison and used the word sodomy.
I'm not going to repeat what he said, but that's what inspired this originally, and it has to do, his comment and reaction to it in the press and around the world has to do with that issue. It's the fact that people feel outraged by that issue. And most of what I haven't been able to review everything that was said in response to the governor's comment, but I can imagine that much of it has to do with people being uncomfortable with this being said in public. And as I said in my comments, we're uncomfortable with this issue in public. We never sought this fight. This fight was brought to us decades ago. This is the initiative of others. And Christianity has been forced throughout the world to respond to it. Now, they're very successful public relations people, very smart people, and increasingly it seems that it's becoming a majority. But still, when it goes to the ballot, it ends up being a 50-50 split most of the time in most places. And even the Supreme Court's decision recently was very, very controversial on DOMA and on California. So we are doing this because of the issue of sexual orientation, which Paul Madore and I have stood side by side on since 1990. The governor's comment presented us with an opportunity to speak to it. And that's what we're doing, and it seems like it's all over the place, but it really isn't. It's addressing the issue of sexual orientation directly related to the comment that the governor made. And nobody is defending the governor. That's the point. We are defending the governor. And we're proud to be the only ones on the planet who defend him if that's the way it is.
That's very well said. Basically what's happening is that religious leaders statewide are on the run. And that's what elicits that kind of irresponsible behavior in the legislature. We're having it, I just spoke to you and I offer the evidence, and there will come a time when the names will roll off my tongue. I mentioned that these men are cowards because they don't declare themselves. I have more respect for anyone who tells me exactly where he stands and does where he stands, rather than to try to conceal his sexual identity. So the religious leaders are on the run, and it's become an open season to criticize good people like the governor for trying to pass a balanced budget, or individuals like myself to be, some will hint that we're just bigots, for protecting same-sex marriage, a 2,000-year-old institution. I would think that individuals who ask these kind of questions are good candidates for therapy. These things have been with us for a while. Abortion, we're going to continue to fight abortion, although the governor doesn't involve himself ideologically in those debates. He did defund Planned Parenthood in Maine, or took considerable amount of monies from them. That's happening all over the country. You heard what happened in Texas. People are not going to bow to the altar of hedonism and debauchery just because it passes law. We're going to continue to oppose these laws, whether you like it or not.
But are you guys aware the governor is using a metaphor?
I want to make
He wasn't actually saying that Senator Jackson was committing sodomy, using a metaphor. So how do you get from there to here, I guess, would be the question.
What are you asking?
The governor is using a metaphor when he made the comment that you're referring to.
Is there something wrong with that?
I didn't say there wasn't, but I'm saying you were taking it literally. Yes. Do you know the difference between a metaphor and being literal? I guess first of all.
How am I taking it literally?
This whole anti-gay press conference.
What was he referencing?
He was referencing the metaphor.
Of what?
Referencing a metaphor of homosexuality, right?
Okay, homosexuality. There we go. That's what we're here to talk about. And I want to address the point about being called a bigot. The folks who have pushed this agenda have done so and have been successful because they have manipulated good people by throwing around words like bigot. And then they get people, lots of people in ivory towers to write sophisticated and high-sounding papers that support the insult. The effect of that during my career, and I've debated this issue publicly all over America, is that Christianity never really came out and defended itself. We were always doing polls and public relations and listening to the marketers who were telling us that it's going to stick to you. It's going to stick to you. They're going to call you a bigot, and you're going to look like a bigot if you use the word sodomy A reporter told me last year, if you use the word sodomy, that's the S word to journalists. You can't use that. That's a swear word. That's probably, using the word sodomy may be worse than what the governor said. But the point is, for 30 years, there hasn't been a debate. We've never had a debate because there's only been one side that's been debating. Christianity hasn't been allowed to debate because people scream that they're bigots, and good people who don't want to be thought of as bigots and who shrink in the face of insults, and we all have that propensity, just become quieter, quieter, quieter. And that's why I use the word sodomy now, because I believe, in retrospect, we should never have not defended it. We should never have, for marketing reasons, decided to debate using the words that the other side, through polling, decided would work, like sexual orientation. What does that mean? You've asked me if I'm a bigot. I want you to go ask whoever on the other side what in the world sexual orientation is. And what is it? And define it. And is it sodomy? Does it include sodomy? Ask them that. Does it include sodomy? Ask them to define sodomy for us. Ask them to define how does sexual orientation work with a third grader in a public school when you're promoting the idea that they might be that way. Well, what is that way? Well, we now know not only does it include sodomy, it includes men wearing dresses at the women's shelter in Portland. So put them on, get them to explain this, and make them go all the way to explain it.
Mike, you called us here to commend the governor for his comments a couple of weeks ago. You yourself won't even repeat the comments. I just hoping you crystallize for me a little bit what the value of comments like that is in the context of economic development and government spending, which is what the governor was talking about.
Yeah. The point that we're making, 2 points related to that question. One is, and I said it earlier, he was angry, and he spoke out of anger, and he used the allusion to sodomy, and that's what I and we are highlighting and talking about here. How is it related to those other things, economic development, and the things that he was thinking of when he got angry? I'm sure he wasn't thinking about this particular issue when he made that comment. But that's not my point. My point is that he used it, it came to his mind as a negative thing. Sodomy was a negative thing. And the idea that's being promoted in our schools and in our society is that it's a positive. And so I'm glad to see somebody use it as a negative.
What's your reaction to the fact that he apologized for that comment the next day?
Well, that's between him and God.
What I see happening is a systematic dismantling of moral authority. Is the governor a symbol of moral authority? I think he needs to keep that in mind when he uses comments like that. What troubles me is that the media focuses on what he says rather than what he was trying to do, was to pass a balanced budget to help Maine people rebuild the house so that Maine people can work and live in an economy that they can afford. That never made it to the finish line. And the way that it was manipulated by liberal Democrats and many Republicans that followed suit in overriding his veto. I think there's a dismantling of moral authority. I've proven it to you beyond a reasonable doubt, and I'll continue to do that in the coming weeks, that it's happening in our churches. And the churches ought not to, moral leaders, religious leaders ought not to criticize a man for his weakness publicly. They ought to go to him privately and counsel him and take the reality of the situation into consideration. There's a lot of foot dancing here going on the peripheral of this conference here to try to take blame at the governor. It's not gonna survive here, because we know this man is a good man and he's done more for the state than any governor since Governor Longley has been able to do.
Amen.
And so we applaud that. We're not worried about how Governor LePage thinks of us. We're not worried about that. I hope you're listening. We're not concerned about what he thinks about us. We know what we think about him, and we'll be there for him in November. That's just plain and simple. It doesn't get any easier than that. And if he doesn't want to be there for us, that's his decision. We don't control anybody here. But we want to talk to Maine people and tell them, to give them a broader look of what's really happening here in the state and why we're dismantling common standards that allow us the opportunity to respect each other and to work for the common good.
Did you contact the governor's office prior to today's event? And if so, what was the response?
I left a press advisory with this office yesterday. I didn't seek a response.
Mike, something that has not been mentioned here is something to do with the fact that sodomy is the cause of a deadly disease.
The fact that sodomy is the cause of a deadly disease, AIDS, yes. That's been proven that it's spread that way, and in other ways.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for coming.